enduring stories. Tales of triumph and defeat, past wars and ancient feast, powers of darkness, powers of light. Tales, too, of new horizons, future hope, and the dream of peace. Stories of an island people. Stories of an island peace.
This story is one of faith, discovery, courage, tragedy, war, sorrow and success. A story with few rivals in modern mission history. It began on the 13th of August, 1896, when 6 Divine Word missionaries, 3 priests and 3 brothers, landed at Madang on the north coast of Papua New Guinea and founded their first mission settlement in Tumleo Island. As head of the new mission, Father Jansen chose 37-year-old Father Eberhard Limbrock.
He was a very ascetical man. He was, of course, by profession a blacksmith in Germany. When the mission started in China with Answer and Granadametz, he was shortly after that sent to China because of his practical knowledge, and he worked there for 12 years. And so when Father Jansen chose the staff to come here and staff this place in 1896, they chose Limbrock from China to meet them in Singapore and come along with them here.
The SSPS came to Papua New Guinea in 1899 at the request of the SVDs working already for 3 years here in the country. And the reason was really because they felt they needed sisters to work with women, which according to the culture and custom of the country was nearly impossible for the priests. So in 1899, 4 sisters arrived on Tumleo, which is in the Sepik province. Before the war, we were only involved along the north coast and on one Sepik station in Marienberg.
It was Limbrock's idea to support the mission with plantations, and by 1906, reports revealed that the mission had planted 700 acres with almost 30,000 coconut palms, 167 acres with more than 28,000 rubber trees. The mission also had 110 head of cattle and 20 horses. Limbrock had an apparent talent for combining religion and work. It took 200 to 300 people to work a plantation, and these people received religious instruction from the brothers in their free time. Many of these plantation workers later became catechists and brought their faith back to the bush when they returned home.
I think without the brothers we never would have had the infrastructure we have here. And it is in all different fields from the whole setup. Where we can help, we should help. We certainly should not say that we should not do any pastoral work. For example, the time that I have been in Kaningra, so much as I could beside the miracle work, I was helping out on Sundays with sermons, doing the communion lotus for many years.
The work of our first missionaries has been great. You look at them as kind of an heroic people, you know, taking up challenges. It did not matter the difficulties of the climate, the territory, whatever was there, I think they were able to face it and go a step further. But also, I believe that they must have trained at that time already, at the beginning, they must have trained very good lay people. Even on a level of carpenters, workers, together with the priests and brothers, they were really well-trained people.
Nevertheless, the beginnings were physically difficult, with many missionaries dying of diseases like malaria and blackwater fever. In one of his letters to Arnold Jansen, Father Limbrock wrote,
The most diversified demands are made on us. For sea journeys, we must understand sailing and navigating. There are many wounds to bind, sicknesses to study, and sick colleagues to care for. As soon as we leave the mail steamer, we need our own boats, our own landing places, boathouses and piers with cranes and winches. In addition to this, there is the usual work of caring for souls. These are only sidelights, but they give you a picture of our situation here. No matter what kind of job comes up, the story is always the same. If we don't take care of it ourselves, no one else moves a finger. Once again, I appeal for reinforcements. Brothers, priests, sisters.
Father Limbrock wanted to have a large central mission station, which would serve the needs of all the SVD stations. So in 1905, the pioneer missionaries moved their headquarters to Alexishafen, a fine harbour less than 50 kilometres north of Madang. Here the brothers started new plantations, set up workshops, built a fine cathedral, mission house, schools, and for the Holy Spirit missionary sisters, a convent and hospital. Today, more than 100 of them, including many local girls, run schools, clinics and hospitals, and do a great deal of other vital work for the local church.
Na 7 Liter. Na 500 gram flour. Na 3 villa kjau.
Minä voisin pitää vuoden sinne redistä.
In 1913, Father Limbrock sent Father Franz Kirschbaum, who had a flair for languages, to open a station some 6 hours upstream from the mouth of the Sepik River at Marienburg. Fathers Limbrock and Kirschbaum had climbed the hills behind Boyken, and when they reached the Sepik, they were amazed at the great population and innumerable villages on the inland slopes of the coastal range. Kirschbaum spent all his life in the Sepik area. Meanwhile, the regional headquarters was moved to Wewak. The First World War put an end to further expansion because of the restrictions placed upon German nationals. But the missionaries used this time of restricted movement to consolidate their work. Franz Vormann, for instance, already spoke the Tamleo and Monumbo languages, and now learned the Wewak language too. He compiled a dictionary and grammar for the Wewak region, and translated the more common prayers. The plantations at Wirui and Boyken were built up, and outstations were opened at Kairiru and Mushu Islands, and at Wam, west of Wewak. Bishop Wolf was appointed Vicar Apostolic for Togo in 1914, but was prevented by the war from serving there. In 1922, he was appointed to Papua New Guinea, and he became the first Vicar Apostolic of Eastern New Guinea and the first Apostolic Administrator of Central New Guinea. In 1928, Monsignor Joseph Lorx was named Prefect Apostolic of Central New Guinea, now the West Sepik District. By that time, people were beginning to wonder what lay inland, beyond the mountain ranges. Fathers Schaefer and Ross were among the very first missionaries to penetrate into the highlands. They traveled with some 75 carriers on their first trip. Later, Father Ross had his mind set on working among the people of Hagen, but had been ordered by the bishop to build up stations at Mingende and Denglagu as way stations between Bundi and Hagen. Sir Wamp remembers well his first encounters with Father Ross.
Emi tablong mendeng emi kam ora tablong Bundi, ikam orgo telong Jimbu. Patri tepe emi tablong emi bian emi kamlong itablong Mingende Jimbu. Na patro emi kam orgo telong ya, emi luki mi long tetile ya, mi luki mem long tetile ya. Mi logate mol na mi gibim kai. Mau tengkra emi long pola na tingi emi tamprano onem tamting ol man emi pretlongen oli kamorat oli golong buti muta emi tok bitin emi wili emi atike mina mi atike wili ota emi tok bitin mi tok bletena emi tok bitin tok inglidia makem long pinge ya tetlo mangi emi kitim Tambla long nebile, kitim tambla monkey, ligling monkey. Kitim long ablong gui, na kitim long ablong baya, all kita pantablong temple, all kita emi ligling monkey ya, monkey orten. Emi no big bala oli kitim na, tugli mol, tetra pelet. Bian oli makem go katik.
Saint Man Mary,
I think emi kutum ground long 8 bulangen long 8 bulangen. All bangra all tambrani ya think emi kitim all monkey ya. All tambrani ya emi kitim all monkey belong mi bula. Na mi to I think emi no kilim na kai. I think emi tap na mi gumunem. Patro emi dailong degree. Na plan de ola kanya tingi mi plablong tetla pulati emi patol kita all big nani putim ground long chicken pulong all putim pet man Mary all big nani planem long tetla pulet na plane all people ya tingi mi papa pulong mi pulai mi dai.
Meanwhile, other missionaries were establishing new stations in Chimbu and an airstrip at Mingende, which received its first flight in late 1935. However, trouble was brewing, and the Chimbu people were becoming hostile towards the missionaries and their carriers. Eventually, some incidents occurred which led to the deaths of Brother Eugene Frank and Father Karl Morscheiser.
In this exact place where we are standing, Father Karl Morscheiser was killed on the 16th of December 1934.
The story goes that after an argument with the people of Wamatne, one of the missionaries shot a pig. The people vented their anger on Father Morscheiser, who happened to be in the area at the time. An eyewitness tells the story, which is here translated from the local language to Pidgin and then to English.
People were shouting and making a lot of noise, and the owner of the pig got very cross with Father Morscheiser and came up here towards this area, and he was shouting, and his people here were hiding in the mountain here just behind us and on the stones here, and they ambushed him when he got to this place here, and one fellow hit him with an arrow and got him right here in the neck, and Father Morscheiser fell to the ground, but he also removed the arrow quickly, but blood came out and he lost a lot of blood instantly, and he just moved a little bit up the road here, and he died from that arrow wound and from a loss of blood in 1934.
When the people of Kangri got the news that Father Morscheiser had been killed, they went down to bring back his body to have it buried in Kangri, which is a small village a short distance from Wamatne along the Chimbu Gorge. Here to this day, the people remember Father Moshizer and continue to bring flowers to his grave.
The people remember him still, and they still talk about him, and they still honor him, and they have his picture in their houses here to remember him, and they still feel very much attached to Father Moshizer.
Mission work had hardly started in the highlands when World War II began. One month after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, they bombed Madang. In 1942, they invaded New Guinea and occupied Wewak and Madang. All the missionaries were interned. The treatment of the Japanese varied from one commander to another. On Kairiru, some of the missionaries were badly treated. But the 2 days that stand out in the memories of surviving missionaries are the days that claimed the lives of many brothers, sisters, and priests. The first of these dreadful days was March 17, 1943, on board the Akikazi. Some 40 missionaries were executed, beginning with Bishop Lurks.
The second day was the 6th of February 1944. It involved missionaries, the SVD missionaries or style missionaries from this area, Madang province. We were about 125 people. Bishop Wolf, priests, brothers and sisters. In February 1944, we were transported by the Japanese from Manam Island, where we were interned, to Hansa Bay. Late in the afternoon, Saturday afternoon, we boarded the ship and established ourselves as well as we could. And the following morning, it was Sunday morning of February the 6th, we were off Wewak. I forget the time, must have been between 8 o'clock in the morning or something. We saw a ship burning off Kairiru Island. And then the next thing I remember were a squadron of bombers heading straight for our ship. But then the planes came over the ship, strafing the ship and bombing. The bombs went all wide. But the strafing caused about 70 of us to die there.
During the Second World War, when we had already about 100 sisters here in the country, mainly from Germany, Austria, Holland, and some from America, we lost then 55 of our sisters through the Japanese occupation. Over 20 died on the bombarded ship of Dorismaru, and some of them on wounds in the concentration camp up in the bush. About 21 died in the Akikatse, where all of the missionaries and other lay people were shot. So by the end of, by 44, Papua New Guinea mission, one could really say, was finished.
even if World War II put missionary activity on hold, it also brought out the strength of the catechists who were left behind. In 1947, when mission authorities in Alexishafen took stock, they found that the Madang, Goroka, Chimbu, Hagen areas had a total of 219 active catechists who were instructing 12,748 catechumens. By the time all restrictions on missionary travel were lifted in July 1947, Father Ross began patrols to Minj, Bans, Nondagal, Ulga, Kuli, Kuruk, Kumdi and Wurup.
I came to Papua New Guinea in September 1947, and within 2 weeks I had an appointment for Wabak, it was called at that time, for Wabak to start the mission here under the direction of guidance of Father Ross. And he told me he was making a reconnaissance patrol into the Wabak area. And of course I said right away, can I go along with you? He said, of course, you should be with me. I said, okay, set the date. And on the 16th of October, I had walked to Mount Hagen. It was walking in those years. I walked to Mount Hagen, joined Father Ross, and we set off on our patrol. And then we went on to Wabak and contacted the government officer there. And he gave us some information about where the boundary was. We could only go a few miles further. Where we are sitting right now here in Sari was really the edge of the territory that we could go into. And beyond here, just down that way, it was already restricted territory. And Father Ross looked around, and the officer went with us at that time, and he brought us to the edge of the territory, and I felt like Moses looking into the promised land. We couldn't go any further.
As more priests became available, they were sent to those places where catechists had been active. During 1948, newly arrived Fathers Joseph Krim, John Labor, John Dunn, Bernard Dowd, Joseph Wallachy, and Edward Missick settled in these posts and helped to gather in the harvest. But besides caring for the spiritual and medical needs of the people, each mission parish had to work at being self-supporting. This involved the parishes in the work of running stores or finding other means of livelihood. The dedication and hard work of these missionaries paved the way for the parishes to flourish. In 1959, the Western Highlands and Enga districts were separated from coastal Alexishafen and Wewak and became one vicariate under Bishop George Bernarding. His introductory inventory was 24,069 Catholics, 310 catechists, and 3,000 catechumens. By 1968, this rose to 70,000. In 1971, it was 80,000. In 1982, after Wabeg became an independent diocese, the number of Hagen Catholics stood at 95,000. During these years, there was a great flourishing of parish expansion.
After the war, other missionary groups came. Protestants, of course, different groups, but also other religious orders, so that today in any diocese, as well as the Divine Word Missionaries and Holy Spirit Sisters, we would have Sisters of Mercy, Christian Brothers, Marist Brothers, and many other religious communities, priests, brothers and sisters.
Modern means of communication, especially aeroplanes and radio, played a big part in rebuilding the church after the war. Divine Word Airways used planes for their regular travels with personnel and supplies from the north coast to the highlands. They were piloted by our priests and brothers and by lay missionaries. But the most famous of all our pilots was Archbishop Leo Arkfeld.
When I got to Wewak in 1948 as bishop, there were no connections with any mission station by road. The only stations that were here were those along the coast and then those in the bush who were contacted only by walking or horseback. So the natural thing seemed to be to start working on small airstrips connected with the stations, and then when starting a new station, we would also think very carefully about the airstrip. So in this way, little by little, stations became more available, easier to reach, and every year we would be able to add a couple, either new stations or new airstrips. And over the period of 20 to 30 years, we finally were operating into about 40 airstrips with 5 planes.
Looking over the 100 years of our presence here in Papua New Guinea, we could divide these particular 100 years in about 3 phases, I would say. The phase before the Second World War, which definitely was a phase of establishing. The second period is a period of the war, which has been a real destruction. And then we come to the third period, which is the period of the local church. The local church being canonically established was not anymore mission territory, but became local church with its dioceses. So our presence during this third period has been more of an insertion. Definitely our number was still there, but it was more an insertion into the policy, the programs, the vision of the local church. And on top of that, the development of the country was also becoming more and more evident. The movement for autonomy, movement of independence in '75, the particular self-study of the church between '72 and '75 gave also a feeling to the people, what are we? And the famous say, which was created at the time, was, we are the church. So a kind of awareness that the church is not foreign anymore, that the church is here to stay, and it has already roots among the people. The constitution itself of the country, at the beginning the constitution opens up with a declaration that this country is a Christian country. So all these elements, I believe, is influencing our missionary outlook.
In 1968, the Catholic clerical religious superiors of Papua New Guinea set up the Melanesian Institute for Pastoral and Socio-Economic Service in Goroka. It was founded because several people came to the conclusion that the church in Melanesia could not take deep roots without it. These were Jerry Buss, SVD Regional Superior, anthropologists Herman Janssen, MSc, Ernest Brandewy, SVD, Joe Noble, SVD, and Gerald Arbuckle, SM. The former director, Ennio Mantovani, believes that orientation courses were the main reason for the establishment of the Institute, courses which would presuppose careful and scientific research. Now in its 28th year, the Melanesian Institute has had a profound effect on the Church of Papua New Guinea. It has become a prestigious ecumenical center for religious and sociological research. Another means of communication that began after the war was the printed word. Archbishop Arkfeld was also its pioneer when he started a small offset press at Wewak in 1968.
Word publishing is basically a child of Vatican II. bishops, when they returned from Vatican II, were very strongly influenced by the deliberations and so on there. And one of the things that they thought they had to do here, and it would be something that should be done rather quickly, because if you didn't, it would be too late, was to get away from just the church talking to itself and to its members through catechetic or liturgical publications, but the church had a message to the world, and that they should have some vehicle to give this message, and that's what the beginnings of Word publishing were.
We gathered around as a small staff, and none of these had ever gone beyond 8th grade education. They knew a bit of English. We trained them how to type and send, and while this was going on, you know, gradually for one whole year to year 69, it was just taking shape, and the building was being built, and we were training on the side. And then the point came up about the name of the paper. It had to be a name which was attractive in Pidgin and still had no overtones. So we come up with one talk. One talk literally means of the same language.
Although the Catholics are still the major shareholders, with 3 Catholic dioceses holding 30% and the Divine Word Missionaries 25% of the shares, the real strength of Word publishing is in its ecumenical character.
We see the whole thing as an apostolate. It's not a money-making concern. We're very happy that in the last 12 months we've got almost to the point of making ends meet. We don't seek to make money. We seek to serve the nation by presenting a Christian approach.
When I write, I try to write from an ecumenical standpoint. I don't think what is an Anglican perspective on this, but what is a Christian perspective on this issue. I think all the churches are happy to be involved. Sometimes we get a few complaints that we've forgotten about a news event in one particular church. There are a few complaints like that, but by and large people are happy, I think.
The company now publishes 3 weeklies: Wantuk, The Times of Papua New Guinea, and Weekend Sport, and a monthly, PNG Business. The Times, which has a circulation of about 12,000, has been voted best newspaper in the South Pacific on a number of occasions. Another enterprise that has been blessed with success is our Divine Word Institute in Madang. Most of its 400 students are Catholics, but some are from other churches. About 40% are young women. It provides courses in subjects like arts, communications, business and religious studies.
To understand the role of the Institute, I think you have to see it in the context of all the work the Church has done in education in this country. We have more than 1,000 primary schools and more than 25 high schools. But this was the first time that the Church really moved into tertiary education in a strict sense, apart from teachers' colleges and nurse training and priest training, training people for their own institutions. But this is training Christian laity. The feeling was that unless the Church really tries to do something on the level, middle management level or the middle strata of society, then a lot of the work done at the basis would be perhaps endangered. And some people haven't understood that perhaps, but I think it is now becoming more accepted that it's very important that the Church also has a small presence in the world of tertiary education.
Since 1975, the Communications Institute of Goroka has been producing bilingual religious and developmental programs which are distributed to 15 local stations. It also runs a religious cassette ministry and is the largest Catholic radio and video production center in the country. Some radio programs of a religious nature are also produced in Wewak by Father Pat Fincutter.
What we do is produce a 5-minute religious radio program, which is basically a scriptural reflection, which is aired every night on Radio Wewak, the provincial station for the East Sepik province. This station is heard in the East Sepik, but also throughout the whole country. There is another program we produce also, a 15-minute program called Lotublong Wireless, which is a devotional program that's on 7 o'clock Sunday evenings.
From the 1960s on, large numbers of lay missionaries arrived and proceeded to play a big part in the various fields of health, education, building and administration. They also worked with youth and helped out in many other areas, including justice and peace. Some of these have stayed on permanently, and some have also joined the ranks of the clergy. Without the help of these lay people, the task of evangelization would have been much more difficult.
The changes in the church and the missionaries who were the staff of the church who very much identified themselves with the church. In fact, many of them never even saw a national clergy as a possible reality in their own lifetime. They just thought missionaries would continue to come. But then suddenly, in the late 60s, Bomana Seminary started up, and the self-study of the church came along in '72, and of course prior to this, Vatican II had taken place, and well, missionary awareness and the temporariness of it to become much more conscious in the mind of many of the missionaries, and so they began to see that they had to be looking forward to the national clergy taking over and to the missionaries phasing out. What I see as the role of the SVD is to do their best to continue giving over as much as they possibly can to their national brother priests and other church workers, to really help them feel the same spirit of church as we ourselves do, and to have this same sort of dedication and everything like that.
We are resolved to offer ourselves to the most blessed Trinity, in union with the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, in order that His blessing may come upon us and the missionary work of the Church in every greater abundance, for the love of God among all peoples.
I'm hoping to have priest with the Word Missionaries, and I'd like to teach, be a teacher.
Before my vows, I was thinking very hard on to become a communicator. So I want to study communication. Well, I have no experience on communication, but the interest was there within. So I asked the superiors who were in charge of me. So now I more or less got my vows, and it seems I'm part of the society already. And their responsibilities were given to me that when the vows is finished, when you have your vows, then there's a future where the SVD can support you fully to achieve what you want as a communicator.
I think one of the big challenges for the local priests is that they get out of the tribe, practically, out of the social system. Now, to be a big man or a real man with a name, you will be part of the social system and take part in the exchange system and be able to kill pigs and give presents. And once they are priests, they're just not rich enough to do that. They don't have all that. And I think perhaps that is for some of them heavy, difficult. the ordination today was for me a very emotional moment, which I had not at earlier ordinations. But you see these two men being ordained, and that whole history of starting here, beginning, and the difficulties and the efforts. My whole life just passed, and I saw these two men being ordained, and it was for me really, yeah, it really touched me very deeply.
Certainly there is progress, and vocations are increasing, but the shortage of local personnel, priests, brothers and sisters, continues as the workload is ever expanding.
Yeah, we were kind of shattered when the General said a few years ago, a couple of years ago only, that the numbers of missionaries, SVD missionaries in Papua New Guinea, would be reduced to 80 in a few years' time. And I couldn't understand that, because a missionary is a man who comes out to spread the word of God, and it's got to be done in the parish just as well as in the pioneer situation. We can't just make these people Christian and then abandon them.
The development has been great, I believe. But today, and we are now starting the fourth period, I believe. Today the time is to help this particular church, but also the country, but especially this particular church, to become more and more aware of itself, and also to become missionary herself. So I believe that even our own students today, SVD students that hopefully will become brothers or priests, hopefully they will opt to go out. They will go to Africa, and they will go to Asia, wherever they want to go. The point is that people from here who have received faith, they are ready now to give it again. And not only because they are SVDs, but because they are sons and daughters of the church of this particular country. So the church slowly becomes much more aware that she has a responsibility not only for an internal, continuous evangelization, but also a responsibility to reach out and to go out at gentes, wherever there is a need. So that I would see the four great periods. And for us, reflecting on our first 100 years, I believe an era is gone. And I believe a new one. With a local church, but we, with our charisma, within this church, to animate the church and to help the church to find its own mission. Ad intra, inside its own, with her own people, but also a church that looks out. And that will be, I think, the beginning of the new 100 years.